The world is on the verge of a major financial collapse. Skyrocketing energy costs are destroying both household and business budgets. In Europe, many businesses are being forced to shut down, and households are being forced to choose between heating their homes and putting food on the table. How does all this end? And more importantly, what are the implications for Bible prophecy? Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. And that is our topic today, is the coming global financial collapse. I believe that we are heading into the second Great Depression as we speak. Now, this is my personal belief. It's speculative. It is not, I'm no prophet. I'm not telling you what's going to happen. I'm telling you what I think is going to happen from what I'm seeing transpire. But I think as we look at some of these topics, you'll come to agreement that the situation does not look good as it stands right now. So along that note, as we go into this, I want to pull up this article just as a reminder. This is from the New York Post. It's from back in June. And it says, J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon warns an economic hurricane is coming. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon urged investors Wednesday to prepare themselves for turbulence in the market in the weeks ahead, warning that extraordinary financial circumstances were creating a potential hurricane for the economy. Dimon, the head of the largest U.S. bank, said factors such as the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the Federal Reserve's move to tighten monetary policy due to decades-high inflation could stoke chaotic conditions in the market. It's a hurricane. Right now it's kind of sunny, things are doing fine, everyone thinks the Fed can handle this, Dimon said during a conference. That hurricane is right out there, down the road, coming our way. We just don't know if it's a minor one, or Superstorm Sandy or Andrew or something like that. You better brace yourself. So for those who are outside the United States and don't understand the reference or know the reference to Hurricanes Sandy and Andrew, these were major hurricanes that hit the East Coast. They left massive devastation in their wake. So what he's saying here is we could be facing this mild recession, or we could be facing the equivalent of an economic hurricane, a devastating economic hurricane, which I would say would be another Great Depression, a global depression. So how would this happen? Well, we've been talking about some of this in recent months and weeks on videos. Let's start in Europe, which I think is ground zero for all of this. There we find this article from the Brussels Times that puts all of this in perspective. It says, spiraling energy costs force Belgian companies to shut down. Several companies in Belgium have been forced to shut down their production facilities due to high energy prices, meaning thousands of employees are currently temporarily out of a job. Stainless steel producer Aperam is shutting down its production facility due to high energy prices, while fertilizer producer Yara and flooring group Bellew are also winding down operations. High energy prices are increasingly hurting industries. Energy-intensive companies competing in the global market are in particular trouble. And we scroll down here, and we find this section. It says Peter Claes, director of Febeliak, not sure if I pronounced that right, but it says the umbrella organization of energy-intensive companies, fears that Aperam and Yara will not be the only companies that will have to halt production because they can no longer compete in international markets. The gas price in Belgium is now 10 times higher than in the United States. The high energy cost will be felt drop by drop in the industry, with all the consequences that entail for the economy and employment. For some companies, it has even become more profitable to sell the gas they still have in stock than to use it for production. Let that sink in for a minute. So basically they're saying we could liquefy our assets, because that's what they mean by sell the gas they're intending to use as part of their business production, as part of their operations. We can use that to produce, or we can just sell it and collect the proceeds. That's essentially bankruptcy and liquidation when you do something like that, when you look at your assets and go, we're better off, we're worth more just liquefying the assets on our balance sheet than we are actually continuing as a productive business unit. So let that sink in. Then we go and we read this article from Business Insider. It says, Volkswagen is stockpiling windshields and brewers are bulk buying beer bottles amid a looming European glass shortage. So the gas shortage is leading to a glass shortage. It says Volkswagen is stockpiling windows and windshields and brewers are bulk buying beer bottles as a glass shortage threatens a new supply chain crisis in Europe. The Wall Street Journal reported how companies in Europe are likely to be affected by a glass shortage being sparked by soaring energy cost. Making glass involves melting sand, soda ash, and limestone and requires large amounts of natural gas. Energy prices in Europe have soared since Russia invaded Ukraine. A German beer maker which normally buys bottles throughout the year has purchased 50 million in one go, enough to last for 12 months because prices were rising as much as 90%. Glass shortages could also affect supply chains for other sectors as it's used for smartphone screens and to make bottles for products such as medicines and soft drinks. Again, think of the implications of this. So because of this spike tenfold in Belgium, the cost of energy versus the United States. So for these companies that make commodities like glass and chemicals, they can't compete on the global market. It's not profitable. So they either shut down capacity, they shut down altogether. That means that the productive capacity of those plants lays idle, so do the employees. So the employees aren't getting paid. And those employees still have to pay for their own skyrocketing energy costs, their own skyrocketing food costs. They're going to be pinched. It's going to drive individuals into bankruptcy. It's going to drive companies into bankruptcy. And in the meantime, all of these companies, whether they make glass or chemicals or fertilizer, whatever it may be, aluminum, a lot of aluminum producers are facing this problem. They're supplying inputs to other factories to produce products for end consumers, and they're not going to be receiving those inputs, which means that their factories are going to have to cut capacity or shut down. Their workers are going to be laid off and made idle. This is going to have huge impacts throughout the global economy. It's going to ripple all over the world, and I believe it's going to cause another Great Depression, a deflationary spiral, at least initially. So let's go on and we'll read in The Guardian in the UK. This article says, rising energy costs will force thousands of corner shops to close. Thousands of corner shops will be forced to close due to surging energy costs unless the government steps in with emergency support, a trade body has said. The Association of Convenience Stores has written to the Chancellor saying that without financial support, its members will be driven out of business. We will see villages, housing estates, neighborhoods, and high streets lose their small shops, the letter says. The government needs to understand that this is an emergency. Thousands of convenience stores will be forced to make extremely difficult decisions in the face of tens of thousands of pounds of additional energy cost in the coming months, which at best will include canceled investments, reduced staff hours, and increased prices in stores, pushing up inflation even further. For some, however, the cost of energy will make the business unviable, and so they will be forced to close unless action is taken to provide meaningful support. So again, here we have, in this case, convenience stores possibly forced to just close their doors and shut down because it is no longer profitable to operate. So they lay off their employees, they're no longer serving the community. This is going to lead to more shortages, which makes inflation go up. So we're looking at a depression, almost like an inflationary depression, at least in regard to the things that are critical for people to have. Energy and food aren't going to see their prices going down anytime soon. Yet a lot of people may see their source of income go away at the same time. So where does all that lead? I mean, it's other than a depression. It's going to be terrible. This is just going to go reverberate throughout the world. And what is the government response to this, or at least what is the requested response? And I think it will be the government response. Here, this trade association is saying we need support for these stores to remain open. Support. So what does that support mean? That support means, in this case, we need more pounds. In the United States, it'll be we need some dollars. In the European Union, we need more euros. So the government, the request of government, and the government will abide by that request, is going to be to print pieces of paper, these promises, these fiat currency, and hand them out to businesses and possibly individuals. You'll get an emergency inflation stipend of X amount of currency, and that'll make everybody say the government's doing something. But at the end of the day, it will not solve the problem. Why does it not solve the problem? Because governments can endless supply of paper currency. They cannot create energy. And the problem here is a shortage of energy. So printing dollars, printing pounds, printing euro, printing yen, that does nothing to create more natural gas, more coal, more oil, more nuclear power. It doesn't do any of that. And so if the energy is not there, it does not solve the problem. Frankly, it just makes it worse because it keeps demand elevated when supply is short and drives up the price. So then you end up with people going out of business and they can't afford their groceries at the same time. It's a terrible scenario. So along those lines, we read this article from Gold Switzerland. This was written by Egon von Greyerz. He says, an autumn with epic collapses of stocks, debt, currencies, much higher inflation, leading to poverty and social unrest. He writes, the world economy, and especially the political and economic situation today, consists of a potpourri of lethal ingredients which will have dire consequences. Let's look at what this deadly potion consists of. Debt at levels that can never be repaid, sovereign, corporate, and private. Epic global bubbles in stocks, bonds, and property, all about to collapse. Major geopolitical conflicts with no desire for peace. Major wars likely. Energy imbalances and shortages, most self-inflicted. Food shortages leading to major famine and civil unrest. Inflation leading to hyperinflation and global poverty. Political and economic corruption in US, Europe, and most countries. And no country will afford Social Security, medical, or pension payments. So what are governments around the world doing to solve these problems? Nothing, of course. The only thing they know is to print more, and I'll say currency here, not money. They have never understood that a debt problem cannot be solved with more debt. All they can try to achieve is to pass the baton to the next leader, so it will be his problem. This means that all the political, economic, and financial mismanagement of the past 50 years will result in a global collapse never seen before in history. And I agree 100% with the author. We are careening down this road. This is decades and decades of bad policy and financial mismanagement that has put us in the place where we are now. And we've seen in the past they've been able to paper over these things. We had long-term capital management back in 1998. That almost caused a major global financial collapse. They were able to come together and put deals together and paper over that at the last second. We saw the same thing in 2008 when Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, and it created this huge financial collapse where you had counterparty risk ripple all throughout the world credit markets as a company that was deemed too big to failed, and it blew a hole in the balance sheets of all the world's biggest banks, all the biggest companies in the world, and it looked like the financial system would just fall apart. The credit markets would freeze, the global economy would freeze, global trade would freeze. They came in at the last second and they offered these bailouts. So in the United States, they printed more dollars and handed them out to these companies, and they bailed out these companies. They stepped in and said, we will be the guarantor of these debts so that you won't go bankrupt and be insolvent. Again, could they do that again here? I don't think they can, because the problem isn't, if the problem were, well, someone owes me $1,000,000 and they can't pay it, so I'm going to go bankrupt, and then the government comes along and says, well, we'll give you the $1,000,000 so that you don't go bankrupt. That solves the problem. Even if it's not a moral way of solving the problem, it does solve the problem. But if the problem is I lack the energy to survive as an entity, not the cash on my balance sheet to survive as an entity, but I lack natural gas, coal, I lack energy, the government cannot just print more energy. They can't step in and flip a switch or wave a magic wand and make more energy appear. So there is nothing that the government can do except print currency and hand it out, which is going to make the problem worse. So is there any way to avoid this collapse? The only way I can see that it could be avoided would be if Europe, NATO, the United States engaged in a complete capitulation to Russia's demands, and it broke up NATO, and when we had, the European Union paying for Russia's oil and natural gas on the terms that Russia dictates, I don't see that they would agree to do that. Even if they did, there's no guarantee that Vladimir Putin would then supply the energy they need. He has this grip on the European continent, and I can't see that he's going to let go of that. So that's the only long shot I can see where we avoid this systemic global financial collapse. And I think it's imminent. I think we have our own Lehman moment coming here. When you have these energy prices in Europe spike the way they have spiked in the time frame that they have, there are forces unseen and there are liabilities unseen that we don't know about, that one day we're going to wake up, probably on a Monday morning is my guess, and we'll find out that banks are closed, that the stock markets have been shut down, and there's some sort of financial reset that needs to take place, because that's what's going to that's the only way that they can even begin to get out of this. It's going to be bad. There's an estimated 600 trillion or more, nobody really knows, derivatives, financial derivatives out there in this unregulated marketplace, where these are basically insurance contracts between these large entities, these multinational corporations and banks, that say if this unforeseen event happens, well, I've bought this derivative from you and you're going to pay me, and so I've offset my risk, and so I'm good. Well, that's only as good as the counterparty who's offering you that. And once one of those big major players declares bankruptcy, which is almost certain given what we're seeing happen to energy prices in Europe at this point, then I can't imagine that we don't see that ripple effect take place and see the global credit markets freeze up. So what does all this mean for Bible prophecy? Well, what this means is, barring a miracle, going into this winter, just a few months away, Europe will be in its darkest winter since World War II. No doubt about it. And the conditions will be ripe for social unrest, possible revolution. Demagogues will take advantage of this. Politicians will love to make promises to people that they can fix this very uncomfortable situation where people are freezing, where they have to go to public warming centers to get warm, where food isn't readily available, or if it is available, it's at a price that's too high that people can't afford that. And so conditions are going to get really bad. Those conditions throughout history we've seen time again, whether it's the French Revolution or Weimar Germany, the Great Depression, they tend to give rise to these demagogues that play on the people's fears and make promises, come to power. Is this the catalyst that ultimately gives rise to the Antichrist? That remains to be seen, but it's something that we really need to keep an eye on, because we know that the European Union shares the very characteristics that the last world empire, the revived Roman Empire, in Daniel chapter 2 is described as having. So these large and small nations trying to get together to form an alliance to strengthen themselves, but like iron and clay, they won't fit together, they won't mix, they won't hold together. We've been seeing all of that. So is this the opportunity that the Antichrist will take to come to power? Well, only time will tell that. But in the meantime, I fervently believe we are heading into very dark times economically, and we are going to see, I think, before the end of October, we're going to see a new Lehman moment in global financial markets, and we will see a collapse of the global financial system that's going to put the world into a depression. I think the reaction to that is going to be for countries to just start printing currency, and the reaction to that might ultimately be, and has been throughout history, war. So we're heading into dangerous times, but guys, we can be thankful and we can look up, because I know it's the case with you, it's the case with me. My hope is not in my bank account or my house or my government or this world. My hope is in Jesus Christ. And the Bible tells us that Jesus lives and he's coming back again, and we can take hope and joy in knowing that these trying times, Jesus said, in life you will go through many trials and tribulations, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Guys, Jesus has overcome. So focus on that, dwell on that, pray on that. He's coming back soon. So like this, share this, and God willing, we'll talk tomorrow. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.